Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Today I am your host Art with Rent to Wealth. I will be talking to you today about the three types of real estate investor that I've come across in my career, and how to maximize your profit no matter which one you are. So let's get started because these videos are supposed to be 10 minutes, so it's a lot to cover here. So there are three types of real estate investors, and I'm going to discuss each and then why the type matters. There's the active scaling investor. This is someone who's actively buying and selling real estate, and they're scaling their business to grow and become even bigger than they are right now. The next is an active non-scaling investor. This is someone who's active. They're maybe not necessarily scaling, something like a rehabber or something like that. And I'm going to discuss that. The passive investor, which can be passive scaling or non-scaling, and I'll discuss what that means. So passive investors are obviously people that are not actively building their business. They're just kind of got the investment and they're passively sitting on it. So let's get into it. The active scaling investor, they're building scale and they're actively working. What that means is that they're buying and finding investments. They're working on it right now. They're trying to find their next investment as we speak. They spend more time working on the business than in the business. And why that's important is because when you're working in the business, as many of you know, when you're working in a business, you're just keeping that business going. You're not actually growing it. You're just working in the business. Compared to when you're working on a business, you're actually working to make the business grow, and you don't necessarily do the day-to-day operations of that business. So the business knows how to make money. You've put people in place to make the money for you or make the money with you, and you're working on growing the business and going into an area that maybe the business isn't actively in right now. So you're trying to expand the reach of the business. It's important to be successful in this niche. You have to be able to focus on a specific strategy. I say that because when you're out looking for new investment opportunities, there are going to be a lot of shiny objects and a lot of things you want to get into, or you're thinking this might be a good focus, and you don't want to get caught up on the sale of that particular process or whatever it is, to distract you from what your goals are and what you want to actively kind of grow to. You'd have to know what you want to grow to and focus on that. The other thing with active scaling investors is that they spend more time working on people and process than investment, because the people are going to run the day-to-day and the processes are going to dictate how those people work. You're going to spend more time working on your people and your process than you are going to spend on actual investments or whatever you're getting into. And this really applies to real estate, stocks, almost anything. This is a scaling business that's growing. You're going to rely on your people to help you reach maximum potential. A big process and a big part that's hard for people to accept is that they can't grow much further than they can reach if they don't put a good team in place. That's why it's very important that you have a great team and you spend your time on your team to reach your maximum potential. I like to say that a lot of entrepreneurs struggle in this specific point because they cannot let go of the day-to-day. They're so used to doing the day-to-day and they're so focused on it that they can't let go. And you understand that investing is a team sport, meaning that your team is going to help you reach those new numbers, those great highs that you have. And you have to understand that it's going to be a team effort. Now, an active non-scaling investor is someone who's not scaling the business, but they're actively working, can still be very successful, can still do a lot of things. They're actively buying and finding investments every day. They might do it a little bit differently, but they're actively finding the investments. They spend more time working in the business than on the business. The easiest example of someone like this is a rehabber, someone who fixes and flips houses. They spend their time finding investments. They don't really so much go into other investments because they're busy making sure the rehabs are done correctly, making sure that their contractors and subcontractors are doing the work, and that takes a lot of time. And so they spend their time working in the business, not so much on the business and growing to do other things. Usually this type of investor is only doing one strategy, and they're reasonably good at it. A rehabber that's good at rehabbing houses is successful at rehabbing houses, but they're not growing. They're just doing the same thing. It's like going to work for a check. Every day you get up and go to work, and then every day at the end of the day or at the end of the week or 2 weeks or whatever, you get a check. That's the same strategy with a non-scaling investor. You're not growing no matter how much you do. You're not really growing. You may make more money because of the fact that you followed this same strategy, and you're good at it, but you're not growing into other avenues. They spend most of their time working on the product and investment. As a rehabber would do, they spend most of their time working on that particular rehab or that project. They rely on themselves to reach maximum potential. So a lot of times when you can't let go of your investments and you can't let go of the day to day, this is where you end up because you rely on yourself. You don't really trust people. Like I said in the last one, don't rely heavily on others because they can't let go of responsibility. That happens a lot because investors just don't want to let go of the day to day, or they feel someone will mess it up and they can't trust others to mess it up, especially when their money's on the line. Not saying that there's anything wrong with that mindset. I get it, but it's because your money's on the line. So you feel I have to look over my money, but it's going to limit your success. Finally, there's the passive investor. Now, a passive investor is someone who is not scaling and they're not actively working on the business. I put this in the mindset of a investor that has a couple of single family rentals or maybe has one commercial building and they're not actively working on the business, but they're basically just maintaining the business, making sure that it's still doing what it's supposed to do. They have a few investments, but they're not moving to buy more. They spend their time doing something else. So they might have a job. They might have another business. They might have something that they're spending their time doing, but they're not actively building this particular business. Now, they're not looking for other strategies until a problem arises. A great example of this is Chicago real estate investors. Chicago landlords were very fine with everything staying the same, not really caring how the market went. They just rented out their property and they weren't looking for other strategies. I'm in the Chicago market. I've talked to a lot of investors and they were not looking for any other strategies until a problem arises. For example, COVID. COVID immediately killed, and Chicago already has a hard eviction market, but it literally killed the eviction process. And now they're not putting tenants out. So they have real problems now. And now they're looking for other strategies because they can't make the money with set it and forget it kind of attitude that they have as a passive investor. They spend their time maintaining the investment and don't like problems. They don't like problems. As I said before, they don't want to deal with problems. They just want to maintain. They trust the strategy to do the heavy lifting, not them personally. They don't have a crew or a team usually. They just kind of rely on themselves, and they only rely on themselves when they're setting up the investment, not so much when it's running and just going as it's supposed to. And again, they're not trusting of other strategies. They just kind of feel they have it figured out. This is a lot of passive investors. They feel they're smarter than the average bear and they've got it all figured out and they don't need a new strategy or something like that until a problem arises. And then they usually get to looking. Now, does everyone fit these three types of investor? There are a lot of people that are watching this that are going to say, I don't think I'm any of these types. Most investors don't identify as these types because they don't really look at it and they're kind of a hybrid. They may be kind of active where they're looking for a deal, but they're not really looking for a deal. If one comes along or falls into their lap, they'll take advantage of it. That's more of a passive investor. That's an active non-scaling. They're not really looking to do anything, but if something drops in their lap, they'll take it. So there can be hybrids or crosses between the three types of investors. Most people that are hybrids or in between, they never get success past one of these types. So they might be successful as a passive investor, but they're not really successful as an active non-scaling investor because they never really get into that and they don't learn enough to push past that resistance to become successful at that particular type. And most passives usually don't become an active scaling investor because they don't choose to do that. In my experience and what I've seen, and I've had mentors, I've had people that have worked with me, and I've been in some situations where I've got to talk with some really successful investors. The really successful investors master more than one of these types. And what I mean by that is I've seen investors that have an active scaling business and they're also a passive investor. So they've mastered an active scaling business and then they turn around and take that cash flow that's being thrown off of that active scaling business and they become a passive investor and they put it into something that's passive like a syndication or something like that where they're investing with others. The secret is to start small and develop a strategy. Whatever you decide to do, recognize these three types, Start small. You don't have to build a powerhouse in a day, but start small and develop a strategy of how you're going to stay focused in your lane. That's the key, to stay in your lane. And accept the type of investor you are and educate yourself if you want to do more. If you're a passive investor, or maybe you're an active non-scaling investor and you want to become an active scaling investor, educate yourself. Figure out what it is you would need to build that team, because that's the real big difference between going active non-scaling and active scaling, is to build a team. If you're a passive, you can always invest with or let's say you're an active scaling, you can always invest with the passive, become a passive investor in something else. But you have to educate yourself so you don't get taken advantage of, and you'll find success. It's very easy, but I've seen this throughout my entire career. So what should you do first if you want to change, or what's the first step to get into any of the other strategies? First is to network. I did this in my career. I networked. I went out to meetings, RIA meetings in real estate. I go out to meetings and just meet people. Whatever the topic is, I don't even care if I'm interested in the topic, because I get a lot more from the people than I do from the actual topic they're discussing. Next is to educate yourself. Once you start to get some network, you can educate yourself about the specific strategy that you want to take. Then you want to get a mentor. I cannot stress this enough. A mentor is an absolute part of beating the strategy. Instead of trying to recreate the wheel and figure it all out, let me give you an example. When I started off in my career, I did not want a mentor. I thought that I could figure it out. And it took me 10 years to get to something that I probably could have gotten to in about 6 months with a mentor. Mentors will, if you have a specific strategy, they will help you cut down that time. And time is your most valuable asset. Mentors are important, and it's easy to find one. I'll do another video on finding a mentor if that's something that you're interested in. Again, like I said, start small. You don't have to take on the world. Start where you feel comfortable, but you are going to have to flex your risk muscle, because you're going to be doing something that you're not familiar with. So it takes for you to flex that muscle. There's nothing wrong with that, and it's actually good for you. So hope this video has helped you. Until next time, I will speak to you about getting a mentor, or whatever else comes up as a topic. If you have questions, I'd love to hear them. I'm putting these videos out not so much to sell you something, but just to increase your awareness, to share with my experiences with you, and hopefully for us to connect and grow together. All right. Until next time, I wish you the best. Thanks a lot.